I'll try.
Call the meeting to order. I want to welcome everybody here.
Yeah.
I'd like to call on Councillor Zwaagstra to bring the opening, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the last few weeks in my church, I've been teaching an adult Sunday school module on the topic of the parables of Jesus, and we've had a great time the last little while taking a look at some of the parables. And one thing I will say about the parables is that they are designed to shock. They are designed to catch your attention. And so I thought I would read one of the parables and just share a couple things that I noticed within it. I'm going to read a familiar one from Luke chapter 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And behold, a lawyer stood to put him up to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he set him on his own animal, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." So what we have here is a situation where one of the lawyers, as was common at this time, decided to challenge Jesus, ask him a tricky question: what do I need to inherit eternal life? And Jesus turns that around and asks him to answer his own question. And so he does. And this lawyer has given the exact correct answer. But then the lawyer decides to justify himself. He wants to make himself look good, so he asks what he expects to be a nice softball question. Who is my neighbor? Well, what was he expecting Jesus to say? Probably something along the lines of, well, your fellow Jews, the people that are in your neighborhood, the people that you see on a regular basis. And of course, he would have been prepared to say, well, those are the things I do. I must be such a fine fellow. I'm in great standing with God. Unfortunately for him, Jesus told him a parable that turned all of that upside down. The story itself is fictional, as parables are, but the circumstances are quite real. Journeying from Jerusalem to Jericho, that was a trip that often happened. It was about 29 kilometers in distance, a difficult journey, mostly going downhill, very dangerous, very hazardous, just the type of place that robbers actually did hide and attack people and steal from them. And so that's what ends up happening. This guy ends up being left half dead. And then in the story, we see a priest and a Levite come, see this man, and then keep on walking. That's not how the story was supposed to go. Undoubtedly, the audience that Jesus was speaking to would have expected the priest to be the hero of the story. He's the religious leader. He's the guy who always does what is right. And so what a great parable it would have been if he had just stopped there, if Jesus had said the priest stopped and helped him, and this lawyer would have gone, yes, exactly, that's how I should treat my fellow Jews. That's how I should treat the people that I know. But that's not what happens. The priest goes by, the Levite, the guy who helps in the temple, goes by. And then Jesus mentions this Samaritan. Now, we sort of lose some of the impact of this nowadays, because nowadays we hear the term Samaritan, we think, what a great guy. And I did this with my adult Sunday school class. They said, we're going to play word association. Samaritan, first word that comes to mind. Good, because the Good Samaritan. That is the exact opposite of what any of the Jews, any of the people in the audience would have thought at that time. Samaritans were hated. They were despised. They were the absolute last people that the Jews wanted to have anything to do with. They were the enemy. They were the people that you do not associate with at all. And Jesus then tells in the story that the Samaritan stops, helps this guy, and then goes beyond that and takes him to an inn, and then pays for his stay and says, I'm going to come back later and I'm going to pay for any other expenses. Goes far beyond any of this. And of course, then Jesus asks this lawyer the question, which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor? And the response is interesting. You'd think he would just say, well, the Samaritan. But he doesn't say that. He says, the one who showed him mercy. Why did he say that? Because he couldn't bring himself to say the word Samaritan, because it was so distasteful to him what he was hearing. And then Jesus says to him, you go and do likewise. And so the message of the parable is not that, you should be nice to the people around you. We kind of water that down and dilute it. And you should just generally be nice if you see someone, try to help them out. The message here is that your neighbor is everyone else, even if it's your enemy. And you should help someone when they need help, even if it's someone you absolutely hate, even if it's the last person in the world you would ever want to assist, even if it's from a religion, a race that you just despise. They are your neighbor, and you are to help them. So how does this apply to us today? I mean, it's as applicable now as it was back then. And it's a tough thing to emulate, this idea of helping others, the idea of loving other people, even when they're the last people that we ever want to associate with. Certainly, in the business of politics, we encounter all sorts of people, some of whom are easier to be neighborly to than others. But it is our responsibility to treat others with respect and to love others, even when it's really difficult to do so. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us, and certainly for myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zwaagstra. All right, we'll move to the agenda, and there is one change or addition to the agenda, and that is 11C, and that's correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Government and the Minister of Heritage and Culture. Seeing that addition, can I have a mover to adopt the agenda, please? Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Funk. Discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have minutes from the January 5th meeting on page 1. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Penner moves to approve, second by Councillor Zwaagstra. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. There's no business arising from the minutes. Can I have a motion to excuse Councillor Siemens, please? Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Fair. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Okay. We are just past 7:35, so we will move to the public hearing process. This is Bylaw 2066. This is the amendment to the Accessory Signs Bylaw, page 4, starting on page 4. I'll close the council meeting, open the public hearing. Mr. Warkentine, I'll ask you to introduce this, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This bylaw 2066 is for the purposes of proposing amendments to Section 4, Development and Design Standards, Section 4.4, specifically accessory signs. And I'll summarize the changes essentially to allow an extension of the period of time for which mobile signs are permitted to display advertising within the City of Steinbach, particularly sections 139.1, .2, and .3. Notices as required under the Planning Act have been issued. There were no registered objections received as of the writing of this report. Correspondence was received by Community Planning, and the comments contained within their correspondence were in concurrence with those as already expressed by administration respecting the proposed amendments to Bylaw 2066. This particular bylaw was presented for first reading on December 15th, 2015. The recommendation from administration is listed within the package, and that with the proposed amendments that have been prepared and put forward by the City of Steinbach, that City Council consider the issues as is noted, and that concludes the background material.
Very good. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here wishing to object to the changes? Is there anyone here wishing to object? Is there anyone here with questions? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and open the council meeting. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Zwaagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the motion that we move ahead with second reading of these amendments.
Okay. Move second reading. Is there a seconder? Councillor Funk. Go ahead, Councillor Zwaagstra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is certainly something we've discussed a number of times, and so I'll keep the comments brief, but just to note that this change simply is a change to how long a mobile sign can be displayed. Under the current bylaw, there is a time limit of 30 days, and then there has to be a 30-day period where the sign has to come down, and then there's a maximum of 90 days throughout the year. This simplifies the process. It simply states that you can apply for an annual permit. That doesn't mean that every business would necessarily put up a sign on an annual basis, but it gives that option. and it allows businesses that are currently using mobile signs to continue to do so. I think it's appropriate to allow businesses to be able to advertise their services and their products, particularly when they're doing it on their own property, and so I think it's appropriate to move ahead with the change.
Thank you. Councillor Funk, anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep my comments brief also. It was brought to our attention in fall that by the business community that this bylaw was too restrictive, and now we have gone forward and we've loosened up those restrictions, and nothing else has changed. The rest of the bylaw stays intact. It's just that we're allowing for a longer period with a permitting process. That's a way of controlling where the signs go. We'll have a better grasp on everything, but I think that this will be a bylaw that together as a city and as a business community we can work towards for completion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Anything further from council? Anything in closing? Call for the question. All those in favor of second reading? Opposed? Carried. How would council like to proceed with third reading? Councillor Zwaagstra, sorry, Councillor Funk, you move third reading. Thank you. Second by Councillor Zwaagstra. Any discussion? Anything further from council? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Workentine, then this is now the change to the bylaw. It does come into effect right now as we speak.
That is in fact the case, that it does become effective immediately.
Okay, thank you. All right, there are no delegations scheduled for today. The reports and recommendations from the city manager, Mr. Workentine. Anything further, either verbal or?
No, there is one report, but it is included under the administration section of the agenda.
Very good, thank you. Then we'll move to the accounts payable in the back of the book. Can I have a motion to approve the accounts payable, please? Councillor Penner, thank you. Councillor Fair seconds that. Any discussion? No. Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have building permits for December 26th. That brings us, on page 26. That brings us to a total of 34 and change for the year, 34 million and change, which is not our record year, but certainly is a substantial number. When you look at the historic aspect of our permits, we've had some huge increases in a few years past where we had schools and hospital additions and so on being permitted. We've come back to that 2009, 2008, 2007 level, and so we look to see for another banner year in 2016. We'll see how that transpires. Can I have a motion on page 26? Can I have someone to move that resolution, please? Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Fair. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have excavator licenses on page 27. Can I have someone move the motion for the excavator license on page 27, please? Councillor Zwaagstra, moved by Councillor Zwaagstra, seconded by Councillor Penner. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have business licenses on page 51. These do need to be approved. There's a motion on the bottom of page 52. How would council like to proceed? Councillor Zwaagstra moves approval. Second by Councillor Fair. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have the Community Places Grant application in regards to the soccer park on page 53. Can I have someone, or Mr. Workentine, do you want to just explain what that is? I'm going to go through each one of them, but can you explain what that one is, please?
Yes, this is a provincial grant program, the Community Places program. It has been in place for many years. As the city proposes various parks and rec related projects from year to year, there is an opportunity to apply for funding to offset some of the costs. The applications for these projects were submitted in December of 2015. However, as the city was proceeding through its budget process, it was or at least these items have not been brought forward to council for the official resolution until this time, as we got closer to the financial plan public hearing stage of our annual budget process. But a council resolution approving the application for the grant funds is required, and these three particular projects are being submitted to council for those resolutions.
Thank you. Council, how would you like to proceed with 9E? Councillor Penner?
Move to approve?
Thank you. Second by Councillor Zwaagstra. Any discussion?
No.
Anything further from council? Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We'll move to 9F, the Community Places Grant Application for the BMX Punk Park. Council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Penner, move to approve. Second by Councillor Fair. Any discussion? Council, seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. We have the Community Places granted in regards to Poplar Park upgrades. A motion, Councillor Funk, second by Councillor Zwaagstra. Who's ever been to Poplar Park? Yeah, not many people have. It's a small. It's not a poplar park. Yeah. It's a small neighborhood park, but it does need to have some upgrades there. Call for the question. All those in favor? Council, it is interesting. We do have many small parks, and it's good to see these upgrades happening. It's been important that it has not been done, and we've started that a couple of years back, and we see some complete renewal of some of those places. 9H, we have the Dutch Elm Disease, page 54. We have a report. Mr. Workington, please.
This is a report for council's information, just to provide some background. There has been discussion from the province of Manitoba and discussions with municipalities in Manitoba over the past couple of years that there will be, or there was to be, changes made to the Dutch Elm Disease Control Program. Just for council's background and information, a copy of the previous agreement that has been the standard form for many years is provided on page 66. And the proposed Dutch Elm Disease cost-sharing agreement that is being suggested for the coming year appears on page 57. To summarize briefly, essentially what is being recommended by the province of Manitoba is for municipalities to agree to the particular provisions of the new agreement with a change in the funding model, essentially requiring that municipalities incur additional costs, particularly with respect to the removal of elm trees that have been identified to have Dutch elm disease. In the report and the information that was provided both from Russ Dick, our Parks and Rec department head, and also summarized by my report, we expect that the cost implications for the city of Steinbach could amount to a net cost of about $20,000 per year in order for the city to continue with the program, and given the fact that it would now be the city's obligation to pay for the removal of the diseased trees.
What action do you need? Do you need action or do you need our approval on this?
Yes, the normal process is a city council resolution to authorize entering into the agreement. Then, if that approval is granted, administration would take care of getting those documents completed and proceeding with filing them with the province.
All right. Council, this is obviously something that has been talked about previously. We do know that the province did transfer all the operating dollars that they were spending on this program to municipalities, and they did not transfer the capital costs that were associated with this program, and so that's the difference that we're seeing here with the difference in costs. It's unfortunate, but we as council have to decide whether we want to maintain our elm tree population in our city or whether we want to let things go. So, council, how would you like to proceed? Councillor Zwaagstra.
I'll make the motion that we go ahead with the agreement.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Penner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's important that we keep Dutch elm disease under control. I mean, we value our trees, obviously, and this is a program that we've had in place for some time. Like yourself, I'm not pleased with the change in the way the funding works. I mean, as is noted in our report here, this will probably result in an extra $20,000 a year to the city. That being said, I think that even though the change is unfortunate, the reality is that it makes more sense to do this in partnership with the province than to not do it, or to try to do it completely on our own. And so at the end of the day, do we want Dutch elm disease under control? Do we want to preserve our elm trees? Yes, we do. It means we have to spend some more, and we don't like that, but obviously it would be worse if we didn't go ahead with the program.
Thank you. Anything further?
Nothing further.
Anything further from council? Thank you. I'll call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. Council, I would also recommend, with your approval, that we do submit a letter to the Minister of Conservation showing him the clear results of our findings and the frustration that we have with the change in the program. You comfortable with that? Thank you. We'll do that. Any questions of council? Seeing none. We will then move to 11A. This is correspondence. 11A, Valeant Canada, on page 70. Some more as information. Any action on that? Take it as information. We'll move to the Bethesda Foundation on page 73. Take it as information. And 11C, and there are two letters. One is from the Minister Lemieux, and one is from the Minister of Municipal Government in regards to the $5 million commitment to the first phase of our recreation and cultural facilities project. Any questions? Comments? Obviously, Council, there is much more work to be done. We'll continue. The task force continues to work on the community engagement, as well as it will continue to look for a partnership with the federal government, specifically on this phase and other phases as well. Thank you. Take that as information. Number 13, a motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Penner, second by Councillor Funk. No discussion. All those in favor?